Today we're diving into a book called The Way of Prophet Muhammad by Sheikh Muhammad Sadiq, and it makes this really powerful, really urgent claim. In a world with endless choices, there's only one single correct path back to our spiritual home. So let's dig in and break down its core argument. Right from the get-go, the book hits you with this big idea. Life isn't just random, it's a journey home. And that home is paradise, where we came from. Now think about any trip you've ever taken. The most important decision is choosing the right road, right? Take one wrong turn at the very beginning, and you might never reach your destination.
And this image you're seeing here, this is basically the whole book in one picture. The author bases this on a saying from the Prophet Muhammad, and it's a really vivid image. You've got one straight road leading to God, but branching off from it, all these other crooked, tempting little paths set up by Satan. The message is pretty blunt. There is one right way and an infinite number of ways to get totally lost.
Okay, so if there's only one straight path, the obvious question is, what is it? What does it actually look like? Well, let's get right into the book's core premise.
According to the author, the answer boils down to just one word: Sunnah. Now, this isn't just a collection of old stories or historical facts. The book frames it as the complete blueprint for a Muslim's life. Everything the Prophet Muhammad said, did, his morals, his character, the whole shebang. It's presented as the official, divinely provided map for that journey back home to paradise.
All right, so if the solution is that simple, just follow the Sunnah, then what's the big deal? Why write a whole book about it? Well, it's because the author spends most of his time warning about what he sees as the #1 danger: people straying from that single path.
And to show you just how high the stakes are, the author brings up this very stark narration. It's a warning that the Muslim community would eventually split into 73 different groups. And get this, all of them are described as heading for hell, except for one. Just one. So you see, this isn't about small disagreements. We're talking about ultimate success or failure.
So, who is this one saved group? The book points to the rest of that narration, where the Prophet himself gives the answer. He defines them as the ones who stick to his way and the way of his immediate followers, the companions. So the standard for success is crystal clear, holding on tight to that original, unchanged path.
This slide really lays out the core battle the book is talking about. On one side, you have what the author says is the correct way, sticking directly to the two main sources, the Qur'an and the Sunnah. But on the other side, that's the big danger he's warning against. He calls it blind following, or taqlid. And what that really means is prioritizing a scholar's opinion over the direct words and actions of the Prophet himself.
Let's get really clear on what this means. The book's definition of blind following is basically this: you accept a religious opinion from anybody other than the Prophet without asking, okay, but where's the proof for that in the Qur'an or the Sunnah? It's that moment when someone says, well, my scholar says so, and the conversation just ends there. No checking, no verifying.
Okay, so that's the problem. Now, what about the solution? How do you actually avoid all those crooked paths and make sure you're staying firmly on the straight one?
Well, the whole solution, according to the book, comes from this one foundational saying of the Prophet. The claim is that he didn't leave us guessing. He left behind a complete, foolproof guide that guarantees we won't get lost. And it's not some complex formula. It's just two very specific things.
And here they are, the two pillars of guidance. Number 1, the Qur'an, which is God's own book. And number 2, the Sunnah, which is the Prophet's way of actually living out that book. The book's central argument is that if you hold tight to both of these sources, without adding anything or taking anything away, you literally cannot get lost.
But you might be wondering, wait a minute, isn't the Qur'an enough? Why is the Prophet's way so essential? Well, the author points to verses just like this one. It's the Qur'an itself that commands obedience to the messenger. So they're presented as a package deal. Obeying one is obeying the other. You really can't separate.
And here's why that relationship is so critical in practice. The Qur'an gives you the what. For example, it says, establish prayer. Okay, great, but how? It doesn't give you the step-by-step instructions. That's where the Sunnah comes in. The author argues that it's the instruction manual. It shows you exactly how to pray, the movements, the words, the timings. One provides the what, the other provides the how. So, how does all this theory actually play out in the real world? Well, the book doesn't just stay abstract. It gets into very specific acts of rushuk to contrast the Prophet's way with what it identifies as common mistakes. Let's take the funeral prayer as a tangible example from the book.
It cites a saying where the Prophet states that no prayer is valid without reciting the opening chapter of the Qur'an, Al-Fatiha. The book argues this applies to all prayers, funeral prayer included. But then it points out that many people, following the rulings of certain scholars, actually skip this part. For the author, this is a perfect example of choosing a scholar's opinion over a clear command from the Prophet.
And it doesn't stop there. The author applies this same critical lens to a bunch of other practices. Things like building elaborate structures or domes over graves, lighting lamps there, or even women visiting graves. For each one, the book cites specific prophetic sayings to argue that these are clear deviations from the Sunnah that have become widespread through that same pattern of blind following. So as we get to the end, the book brings everything together for one final, urgent call to action. It's really a direct challenge to the reader to stop and reflect on their own beliefs and practices.
And to drive the point home, the author uses this incredibly powerful analogy from a hadith. It paints this picture of the Prophet standing by a fire, and people like moths to a flame are just drawn to it, about to fall in. And he's there, physically holding them back, trying to save them from their own destruction. It really frames his guidance not as a nice suggestion, but as a life-saving intervention.
This all leads to a very sobering conclusion. The book's bottom line is this: sincere intentions are not enough. It argues that any religious act, no matter how heartfelt, if it doesn't match the exact method taught by the Prophet, is ultimately rejected by God and basically rendered a waste of time.
Ultimately, the entire book, with all its arguments and examples, boils down to one simple but profound question for you, the reader. After showing you the one straight path and all the crooked detours, it leaves you with this to think about. When it comes to your faith, whose way are you actually following? The Prophet's or someone else's?